Hey,
Alrighty.
I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode number 85 of the North Meets South web podcast.
So I am so sorry to announce that Mr. Dorinda has the COVID.
Hmm. Why? I
True
mean,
story.
why would you say that? We don't have any, mate. You've got a better chance of having it. Illinois is a shitstorm. The United States is
Dude,
a
it totally is.
catastrophe. And do you know how many cases locally contracted we've had in the last 2 weeks?
Tell me.
That many.
0? That's awesome. See, that just proves it's all a myth. It's not even real. That's it. Australia is not a real country.
All of Australia
It
is
is not a
even
real country.
That's how you know.
Yep.
That's how you know because
That's
you
what I'm
didn't get
saying.
COVID.
Australia is not real. Yep.
It took our
No, I'm
friends
just
in
kidding.
Victoria a little while to get their act together. They had to go through 2 lockdowns, and the second lockdown kept getting extended because they just couldn't do what they were supposed to do. But it's all like it's obviously we don't want to get complacent because this thing is this thing and it can come back at any time. But we're heading into summer now,
Yep.
so it probably makes things a little bit safer. But we don't know how this thing mutates and whatever. But it's we had the news during the week that Pfizer announced that they had some good early indications for the vaccine that they're working on. Now, naturally, a drug company is going to say that that's good, and their share price followed suit.
Right, exactly.
But I think there was
Yeah.
still some concern medically, like medical experts were coming out, and they were like, we probably need to just give it a hot minute. Like, you need to wait, you need to test and see what the long-term effects are, because
I think that's the big concern.
yeah, because
the
90,
rush testing.
90%,
Yep.
yeah, the 90% success is good enough, and that gets enough people successfully treated so that we can start, with the herd immunity and all of that kind of good stuff. But the virus has only been around sort of 12 months, really. And so we don't know long term what the effects of that are going to be. We're starting to see indications of what that is in terms of like liver damage, liver internal organs damaged and things like that, we're not going to know. People that are still struggling weeks and months after they're sort of over the initial hump. And we don't know in a 12-month window that they've been working on any possible vaccine, what the long-term effects of the vaccine are going to be. Because normally these things, they're 2, 3, 5 years of development and testing. Now, obviously, we need to sort of
Accelerate
rush this
the
one.
process
Like we need
here.
to accelerate, yeah. And I totally get that we need to accelerate the process, but there are still reservations. Now, I'm not anti-vaccine, but like
This is like
all of our
I
both of our
understand what
kids
you're
are
saying.
vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. My wife's like we're pro-vaccine, and our kids can't go to school unless they're vaccinated. So
Same. Well, I mean, I think mostly there
yeah,
are people who get around it, but
yeah, they have to have update. We have to provide the records that they are up to date with their vaccinations. So I'm all for accelerating it, but at the same time, like we don't know with how the virus behaves, post recovery and how
this is how this is how I Am Legend happens. Right?
Yeah, the
This is
end
how
of the
I
world
Am Legend
stuff.
happens. Yeah. We have this amazing cure that's going to cure everybody globally,
Mhm.
except for oops, we didn't do our testing and now everybody's a zombie.
Correct.
So
yeah.
hey, you know what? Maybe it could have been taken in bad humor that I said that at the beginning of the show. I'm just trying to add some levity to what is otherwise a very grim situation, right? And you're right. In Illinois, it is sort of a crazy town right now. So they're shutting stuff down and all sorts of mess. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening with Thanksgiving plans and all that. That's kind of what we're trying to figure out now. Yeah. So anyway, before that, we were talking about another. What's that now? Yeah, I know,
I would
right?
try and avoid it. Give thanks by staying at home with your own family and just be thankful that you're healthy and still here and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. So before that, we were talking about misophonia, which is a condition in which a person is overly sensitive to sounds, which we diagnosed Michael with. So that's actually what I was going to say. And then I just decided to switch to COVID at the last minute. But misophonia, that's what you actually have, which is usually like a trigger sound, like people tapping a pen or chewing gum or something like that. Or chewing, just chewing in general.
Chewing in general, yeah. And I was saying that chewing is the kind of thing that if I hear, like if you take a chunk out of a delicious pork crackle or some crunchy bacon or, that kind of stuff's fine. It's the more quiet sound, I'm chewing with my mouth closed than just the
Oh,
I don't know how much
don't.
of
Just
that
don't.
is going to come
Ugh.
through the microphone.
Ugh.
Like, and it's that kind of thing. And it's
That
usually,
stuff.
um, it's people, because if I don't, I'm not phased by strangers, because usually if you are where other
This
people,
is true.
strangers are eating or in a restaurant, it's loud enough that you don't hear, the person next to you, let alone
Right,
other
right, right.
people chewing. So it's not too bad, but it's usually, you know, close people that are close to you, friends,
Yeah,
relatives,
and the
family
reason
members.
why that whole thing kicked off is because I was typing on my keyboard before the show started, and you said one of the most obnoxious sounds in the world is your little Mac keyboard coming up
Yeah.
through your microphone.
Yeah. And you've got like the old butterfly switches on that keyboard still.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
even worse because and so you like really thud on it. And I said, the sound doesn't come through in the stream or anything like that. And I edit it
Right.
out in the audio podcast, but it's just that like I can see the waveform coming up. I'm like, oh, Jake's typing there, and it's just like the dull thud of keys.
The
Shock mount be
rage begins
damned.
to rise. Well, hey man, we've got a couple things we've been working on this last week. We could talk about. I've been working with. Man, we're getting ready to deploy this new phone system, and so we've had to deal with. I mean, so it's a great system compared to like what we currently have, but it's also like these products that you can tell they started out as like, oh man, this is the new hotness and everything, and then you got investors involved, and then it just went to crap. Not totally. Like the system still works, and their onboarding is amazing, second to none. But you can tell that the UI, it was just completely rushed. Like they got halfway through, and then they were just like, just throw it on the page, just get it done, right?
Just make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And their webhooks and like their API interactions, like how you can actually invoke webhooks is pretty nasty. So you can only send information through headers. There is no payload body. Like
that is bad.
Can you imagine that? Like, I mean, that's what we have to do. It's kind of insane. I've never seen anything like that before, where it's like, hey, yeah, sure, we'll send you a webhook when this happens, but by the way, we're only going to send information through headers. So,
yeah,
good luck with that. So
yeah,
that's been kind of fun.
I know what you mean in terms of I've had the same problems with our phone system, and they built the webhook implementation for us on the fly, but the way that the billing aspects of the phone system and the actual phone call part of the phone system talk to each other on their end, like they're separate things. So some things are considered part of billing, so that when we get an event that a phone call has started, for example, it doesn't necessarily follow through to a hang up event or a change in queue event or an on hold event. So we don't get an event if an agent puts a call on hold, but we get an event if the agent picks it up from hold and it comes through as an answer event.
Okay.
So we can kind of infer that, okay, there was this agent where the call came in, hit the IVR, it went through the queue, and then they answered it. And then you see like 4 more answer events because the agent has put them on hold and then picked it up again and put them on hold and picked it up again until you get the hang up event. So we have to stitch all this stuff together and reconstruct it, and we have to join different records together, and we have to make some inferences. And there was like no documentation. It was kind of slapped together. So I was working with the developers for the phone platform to get them to like give us some information that could tie us together, because in some instances we couldn't tie together sibling events, like one event after the other. We had to kind of infer and like jump around it and then come forwards to get some information out of it. So that was lots of fun.
Oh man,
getting that
ours
done.
isn't that bad. Ours actually has we actually have like a reconcile file at the end of the day too, so it'll download at like 11:54 p.m. and it's just like, here's all the calls that were made today, so in case you missed anything with your live stuff, it just kind of like you can reconcile at the end of the day, make sure you didn't miss anything.
We get the total call records, but those call records, because their billing and the phone record system are separate. For example, if we have a callback, so if a customer calls us, they press 5 for a callback, and then we call them back. That appears as 2 different calls, as the original inbound call and then the subsequent outbound call, and there's no way to link the 2 together historically. So if we don't do it on the fly with the webhooks, correct. Yeah. So like if I look at it, I can say there's the inbound call and there's an outbound call to the same number. So I can guess that those things are probably related. But because they're not tied together from their end, we can't really make the assumption in our automated system to
Yeah.
do that. So some of our statistics get a little bit hairy, and there are things that we can't infer hold time based on
Ah,
based on um
because you get separate
this
events each time somebody
correct.
picks up, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's things like
Wow,
that
that's
if we
sort
don't
of a
do it on the
mess. Yeah.
fly, then we don't necessarily have it. And there's some back and forth. They want to spend money on like a proper the phone system we've got is fine for the size we were when we had it, up until basically when we got it acquired, and we're kind of at the size and scale now where we're feeling the pain of not having the statistics because you can't do KPIs and things like that accurately
Sure.
if you
Right.
haven't got accurate reporting. And we've got pretty much 98% of the way there, but we're in that sort of sticky spot where we kind of need the functionality of the phone system to do some more advanced things and to like prepare for the future. But the leap in cost from what we're currently paying to that level of phone
Yeah.
system is like we can't justify it from a cost perspective. So it's an interesting dance, and I've said, look, my hands are off of this phone system now. Like we we've spent so much time figuring out, handling the events, um, stitching together the call records, making sure it all presents as accurately as possible. Um, we can't spend any more time on it. And if you want anything more in depth, you're gonna have to, you're either gonna have to
That's why
suck
it
it up
starts
for
like,
now,
yeah.
or you're going to have to spend the money to go to the next level. And
Yeah.
then the downside of doing that is that it takes weeks to get a new phone system in. You've got to do the
Oh,
cutover.
at
Things will
least.
stop
Yeah.
working, and then you have to learn how to use the new phone system. We're all remote now, so that needs to be factored in terms of like, do you have soft phones? Do they work as well as the ones that we've got now?
Yeah.
And all of the retraining of staff and retraining the staff en masse is much more difficult when everyone's remote because you can't physically have
Absolutely
a
it is.
handset there and like push this button and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge. I think we're sort of getting to the point where we're looking at returning to the office in full, the whole contact center and things like that. But it could still be early next year before that happens at this stage. So
Yeah. So I'll make my pitch here. So like if you're switching to a new phone system, Live Vox is the one that we're going to be using.
live,
It's pretty nice actually.
nice.
Like I said, like there are certainly things to complain about, right? There's some weird stuff, but all in all, it's not too bad. And the other thing, like, okay, two other things I was going to say, we're at an advantage in some sense because the system that we're switching from is literally the dumbest system in the world. Like, and when I say
Mm,
dumbest, I mean that we have no integrations built with it at all.
mhm.
Like the reporting is garbage, and like I can think of like two things that we have that's built that we that we have integrated with it, but like barely anything. So everything that we're doing, it's not like we're having to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff that's currently integrated into an existing system and rewrite it into the new one. It's just
Mm,
everything we're doing is brand new, which feels
yeah.
really good. The last thing I was going to say too is like when you were saying like I'm hands off on this phone thing, I was thinking like, oh, that's so nice. Like I wish I was back at that spot again in some senses. But then I'm like, it is actually a trade off because I do get to have input into how we're structuring it. So it's not like you
Mhm.
just get something delivered to you like, hey, we made this really dumb decision. Now you need to work with this. Please tell your developers this is how we're doing it now. It's like, wait. Did you think about this? Well, no, but this is how we're doing it because we already decided. It's like, no, if you just would have done this one thing different, it would have been so
Yeah.
much better. So I'm thankful that I've been able to at least have input on some of that stuff.
Mhm.
It's good. It's good. We're getting there. So anyway, that's been kind of an adventure. We're going through SOC 2 audits, which is again nothing fun to talk about,
No.
but software development lifecycle stuff. And then the one thing I've been working on that has been kind of fun is Netlify. So I've been messing with
Mm.
Netlify a little bit, um, which has been kind of cool. Uh, Lambdas, like they have these lambdas you can throw in there now, and like this
Mhm.
function stuff.
Yeah, so you
So
can
that's been kind
background
of cool.
processes and things like that now.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's been kind of interesting. And then of course the big kahuna, the big one is that what happened with NPygmy this week?
Well, we soft launched it, I suppose.
I think
We
that's probably the best way to put it.
we rushed to the finish line. We um drafted a whole bunch of marketing stuff. We got some mailing uh, emails to go out to people that are part of early access, people that were beta testing, people that are on the list, different things there. We've got some other things you worked on, some Open Graph images to update, that kind of stuff. We just gave a final polish on the landing page to make sure all of that's really clear. Ran into untold horrors with our CI pipeline and the way that we're trying to manage deployment of documentation. It's interesting because initially I had the
that's
docs.
That's a whole thing, dude.
That's a whole thing in itself. That's an episode in itself.
It is.
At a high level, we initially had the docs as markdown files as part of the main application repository, and then I said, we probably want people to have the ability to edit them, submit pull requests and add things if things are not correct, fix type, all that kind of stuff. So we split the docs.
It is good. That's nice, right? That'll be nice if somebody can add those little things.
So we split the docs out into a separate repository, which is just the markdown files. And then we put in, some YAML front matter and things like that in there so that we can get titles and that kind of stuff. And then as part of the deploy, we clone that down into resources. We then, compile the docs basically and deploy it. Now and
the way you were doing that too, so just to be clear, so you were throwing them into resources and then you had a controller that was reading them out of the resources location.
Correct. So they were being read out of the resources. Then we're using the Sparsity response cache package to cache the responses, so we're not, reading from disk and parsing the markdown every time. So it's just the HTML is cached. The problem with that is that we're hosted on Vapor, so there is no disk. So you can't access the resources locally. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we get the docs somewhere where Vapor can read them?
Yeah, because normally what you do is during a normal deploy, you would just say, as part of our pipeline deployment, you would just say, run this command which you've built that sucks the docs down from this Git location, and then it just publishes and pushes them into the resources location on the disk.
Yeah,
but there is no disk. That's the issue.
Yeah, there is no local disk, and you can do local storage and things but then that's another thing that you're paying for and managing, and I didn't want to deal with that. And then we thought, okay, well, we will publish them to S3. But then that becomes a whole other thing, because when you're doing the deploy, you don't have access to the production credentials, and then you've got to make sure that CI has access to those credentials to push it, and that's janky, and all of this stuff just got weirder and weirder. And then I thought, Vapor, as part of its deploy process, will take everything that's in the public directory and publish it to a bucket on S3 automatically for you. And so what I did, which works, but I think is a little bit gnarly still, is we will, as part of the deploy process, we will clone down the documentation into the public directory, so public/docs. We will then let Vapor take those docs and upload them to S3. And then the docs controller just does a file get contents of the asset URL on the S3. I mean, the public docs and the static assets.
Right.
And, you can go and change them anyway. But I wanted it to all be part of the single deploy process that, when we deploy the site, we update the docs rather than having to do a separate staggered thing. So
the file get contents was the key there. It was wait a second. Can we just file get contents on this thing?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I think we
absolutely can.
Yeah, we can do
that. And then our CI pipeline broke because it was not actually publishing them anywhere, and then that was a whole thing. And then because we were using file get contents, it was using PHP's default timeout. So when it couldn't connect to the thing to do it, it was adding 60 seconds to the CI pipeline before eventually the test just failed. So that was a whole ordeal, but they're up. So that was fun and games, but we got there in the end. And so yeah,
then
so we're live.
You've got team invites. That was also a little bit of a drama, right?
Yeah,
so
team, we were ready to do this a couple of weeks ago, and then Teams, we discovered that in order to invite someone to your team, they have to already be a user of
have an account.
Have an account of Then Ping Me, which is a little bit of a user experience boggle, and it's not nice because pretty much once you create an account in Then Ping Me, it paywalls you straight away because you can't do anything.
Right, exactly.
You get a 15-day trial, but it paywalls you. It's you need to slap your credit card down before you can do anything. And we don't charge you for 15 days, but we need that up front. So for someone who's not a user, that's like a crappy experience, because they'll create an account and they immediately get taken to the paywall, which is not what you want. And we were going to just grin and bear it. And then Taylor said that he was going to rewrite Jetstream's implementation to do invites. So you could send an invite to a non-user, and then they would get a link to sign up, and then we'll go from there. So Taylor did that a week or so ago and pushed it into master. And so I then went through and I had to grab out the necessary bits, which were probably 3 or 4 files and a config thing. Tested it, all working fine. We changed the process a little bit, where when you created an account, if you were invited to a team and you created an account, but for the first time, you still got taken to the paywall. So we just changed that life cycle a little bit so that it would switch you to the team straight away. So you would move straight into the team that you were invited to and never see that paywall unless you were to go back to your own personal team, which we create by default. And then if you wanted to use it for your own projects, you could go and do that. So we fixed that up, got it all working, tested it locally. It was beautiful, pushed it live, and then it just stopped working. Like, it kept on telling me that it couldn't find a registered user with that email address when I was trying to deploy that. And doing some digging, it turned out that Vapor will cache your config, which, this is what you want in production. You want your config cache. So I'm like purging the cache, testing it, and immediately it was telling me that was fine. And then when I reloaded again, it was telling me it was gone again. And so I did some digging through the way that it does it. And the way that it does this is kind of clever, in that you don't have a specific features key in your Jetstream config or anything like that. You pass an array into the Jetstream : teams method with an invitations equals true key value. And then the feature functionality within Jetstream checks to see if that config value exists, and goes from there. But because it's not a real config value that's read out of a config file, when it gets cached, it doesn't exist. And so that was always returning false. So I messaged Taylor, and he's like, shit. And I said, I'm pretty sure it's this. He's like, yeah. And then he messaged me a few hours, like, this was after I'd gone to bed. He messaged me a few hours later, and he's like, I think I know how to fix this. And then a little bit later after that, he's like, all right, it's fixed. So I pulled that in, and if you have a look, I'll see if I can put the link in the show notes to what he did, but it's kind of clever in that he will just on the fly write to config. So if you use the config helper and you pass it and a key value array, it will immediately make that available. So it knows that you've said, like, I want teams available. And so rather than trying to read from the cached config, it will inject the config directly, and then that'll get cached on the fly.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
It was a clever solution. So we pushed that out yesterday, and I sent an invitation to Aaron, and I don't know if he created an account or not, but I'll find out tomorrow and see where he went from there. But that was pretty good. So I think we're pretty much feature complete. And so I moved all of my production apps at work over on Friday. So we're not pointing to our staging environment anymore. We're now pointing to production, and they've all been running swimmingly, except I started getting like task missing alerts all day, Friday and into Saturday. And I'm like, what's happening here? And it was because the staging environment was still, monitoring monitoring all those apps, which I had then, I'd moved. So obviously they weren't posting to staging anymore.
Right. They weren't pinging in. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go and delete them from staging. And that was when we ran into the new issue.
The new issue, which is what we're going to talk about today.
We're going to talk about today. Was
the new issue. Yeah, go ahead.
If you have a project, the project has 10 tasks under it, and each task, depending on how long you've been using Then Ping Me, will have 20 or 30 executions, and each execution has 2 pings, a start and a finish, and each of those has then a webhook call. So you can see how this like tree spans out, and over time, like it gets very big. There's a lot of data very quickly. So when you try to delete that, and we're using foreign keys to handle cascading deletes and things like that. So if you delete the project it deletes the tasks, and then for each of the tasks, it goes and deletes all of the pings, and for each of the pings, it goes and deletes all of the so it goes to these executions. For each of the executions, it deletes all the pings, and for each of the pings, it deletes each of the webhook calls. And so when you have, I think I had 30 or so tasks, and you delete 30 tasks worth of, 60 days worth of data, and you're cascading all of that, we're talking tens of thousands of records. It
Right.
nailed the database. And we're only using, because it's just been a staging environment, we're only using a fairly low powered, like I think it's a T3 micro or something like that, RDS instance. And it nailed it. And so I messaged Jonathan and I'm like, bro, we need a better solution here. Like I need a strategy for this. And he hasn't replied to me because it's the weekend, and that's fair. I guess that's okay and understandable. I think
You should be on call on demand.
right. So I think the approach that I had suggested, and I think that we will do, is that we're going to use soft deletes on the project. So when you say delete, it will immediately remove it from the UI, and then
Right. So you can't access it anymore.
correct.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to see it anymore. And then we will essentially dispatch a job that is responsible for going and deleting
for the actual deletion.
For the actual
Right.
deletion going from the bottom up. So I'm just working on that process at the moment.
The database doesn't care, like if you soft delete something, it doesn't care at all, right? And
Correct.
so like you soft
Because we're
delete,
just setting
like
a
you said,
flag
like, it
on the
writes,
field.
you're just setting a flag, yeah. And then if you actually say, hey, every so often, you could probably use Quicksand for that, actually. Titan Quicksand, which has like, it cleans up your old deleted records, your old soft deleted records. And every so often, it goes through and just says, hey, any deleted records that are older than this, just go ahead and actually delete them.
Yes, except no, because that won't fix the problem, right? It's because if it goes and deletes those soft deleted records, we're still gonna hit that cascading issue.
Oh, sure, yeah. So okay, so you're just saying that we don't want to ever delete in that way. We want to delete in a different way. So you're not
Yeah.
saying, you're not just saying for the sake of the user and the UI, like a quick response.
Yeah.
You're saying for the sake of the database.
Well, and this is the thing. I've been getting like Vapor alerts since yesterday or since Friday when I deleted that project because the database keeps going up and down. So the plan, right, is that we'll add a soft deletes to the project, which will make it like, that'll give the user instant feedback. It's gone. And then we'll throw a job on the queue that will essentially load everything it needs to from the top down. And then it will delete those things in batches from the bottom up. So we'll go, project, tasks, executions, pings, webhook calls. So we'll load that stuff up, and then we'll delete all the webhook calls, a chunk 1,000 at a time or whatever. Freek wrote a good post about this on, I think the Odia blog. I'll link it in the show notes when I find it.
Yeah.
Which we've already implemented for our cleanup of like older data. So we only keep 60 days worth of data to be able to provide, what do you call it? Trend data, like comparison between the current 30 days and the previous 30 days. So we need to keep 60 days. Yeah. So essentially we'll just like chunk through that and do it that way. This is where my mind went straight away. Then I had a step back moment and I'm like, perhaps I should go and check to see if there is something else that is causing this issue, like check the database queries, but we're not running any database queries. We're just doing a delete from projects where ID equals 3, right? And then the database is handling the cascade. So I don't think there's any optimizations that we can make. Because it's doing a cascade, the assumption is that all of those things that are foreign keyed are indexed. So it's not like we're missing an index somewhere, because the presence of the foreign key implies that there is an index on that column. We're not looking at any other fields. We're not looking at, IDs. We're not looking at dates. We're just looking at those foreign keys. So I think the solution of going from the bottom up is the correct one. And then we can say like, delete the, run the webhook delete job all the way through. And then when that finishes, then go back up to the pings, and then go back up to the executions, and then go back up to the tasks, and then go back up to the project. And I think I think that will probably solve the. It's not like we're deleting all the time. Like I would assume that if a user is with us, that they're with us. That it's not like they're going to create a thing and then hang around for a month and delete it and then smash the database.
Yeah.
And
And
I know
also,
that the
yeah.
deletes work fine because we've already got the cleanup stuff in there. So we can, we go and find the oldest records. We sort the database by created at descending and grab 1,000, and we just delete 1,000 at a time until none were deleted, and then we know that we've
Right.
deleted everything, and that has no impact on the database whatsoever, and that's been running for 3-4 weeks now. So yeah, it's just I gotta figure that out. If I can have a conversation with Jonathan on his Monday, and go from there, maybe we'll get a better indication of what's happening
His
there.
Monday, your Tuesday morning.
Monday night, Tuesday morning, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
where my head's at now.
I'm
Like
still like, yeah.
conceptually, it's simple. Conceptually, what I want to do is going to work, but we will see. I've got the test
Like you
here.
said, it really does seem odd. It seems odd that it would be that heavy of an operation. I mean, I know there's a lot of them, but they're all, like you said, they should all be indexed. Like it
Right.
should literally just be like a big, massive, like drop them all, like
Yeah.
no problem.
Unless it's like trying to do it all
Yeah.
at once or something, or like
Yeah. Maybe
MySQL's
it's trying to
query
gather them
planner.
all up.
Yeah, it's trying to load them all into memory, and like it does. Like I can't imagine that it's doing it that inefficiently, but who knows really
Who does?
what's
Yeah. I mean,
happening.
because the thing is, like, what you're talking about is like that reverse tree, sort of how you have to go gather everything first
Mm.
before you can start deleting. I mean, that's got to happen. It's not like it magically knows. I mean, I guess
Correct.
if it kept in memory, like the idea of the thing that it's deleting and then went down the tree and deleted all those, but that would seem weird. I mean, like that'd be very odd, especially because you'd have, if for some reason somebody pulled the plug on that database, right?
Mm.
You'd have just all these orphaned records. Like, so I'm
Correct.
sure it's got to start from the bottom,
Mm.
just like what you're talking about.
Yeah. And that's what
But
that's how the Cascade soft deletes package that I wrote,
right,
5 years
yeah,
ago
that's what
works.
I remember.
It keeps on
Yeah,
like going down the tree and then working its way back up. Because if you delete stuff at position 1, you don't know what's under it because like
correct.
it's gone, so you've got no way of referring down anymore. So you
Yeah,
always need to go from the children up to the grandparents kind of thing. So or the
yep,
great grandchildren all the way up to the great grandparents.
yep,
So
yep, yep. So
I've
that's
got the
kind of
test
where.
written, and we'll see how we go. The other thing that I've had to do is seed like 1,000 for each of the 10 tasks that I'm creating. I'm seeding 10. I'm seeding 1,000 executions so that I can actually have a large enough data set in the test to
Yeah,
feel whether or not this is having any impact. Because if you just have like one of each of those things, well, yeah, of course it's going to be fast and it's going to happen in a second or so.
right.
That's not where the
The only
issue
other,
is. We're talking like when there's tens of thousands of them that it becomes
right,
problematic. And if we see an issue in slowness at 1,000, it's definitely going to be there at 10,000 or 80,000 or
for
whatever.
sure.
So
For sure. Yeah. It's kind of amazing how much data gets generated, how quickly. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Um, I do almost wonder if it wouldn't be worth it to try and do some sort of snapshotting. It would make everything, I mean, make everything a lot faster, right? That seems to be a pretty common solution. The only problem with that stuff is that, like, if you want to add a new metric, and you've since deleted all that stuff, you
Yeah,
can't. Like you
yeah,
can't ever add that metric until you have at least double the amount of days of what like if you said,
hmm
well, I guess only if you want to do the comparisons, kind of like what you're talking about. If you wanted to compare this 30 days to the last 30 days and you wanted to add a metric to that,
yeah,
well, good luck. Either that or you have to do event sourcing, which is basically you can rebuild all of
mm,
those from forever back, right?
yeah.
But it's not
So
like we actually let people look back historically.
no,
Uh,
like
so
we just show them like you've had this many executions now versus last month, and I suppose the more important metric is alerts. Like how many alerts did you have this month compared
yeah,
or this 30 days compared to the last 30 days? Because that's where you see the
yeah,
meaningful change.
that's
Um,
right.
we've got metrics ourselves and we take snapshots every day. So once a day we'll go and take a snapshot of all of the new users, alerts, projects, tasks, executions, pings, etc. And we take it. So we've got a number. So we do a count star since yesterday.
Yeah.
And then we just like when we want to draw the line, we just grab all of the data points from the metrics table because that way we're not doing calculations on the fly. We're just like, give me the last 30 days worth of these records. And so we're returning 30 records from the database instead of, at the
Instead
moment,
of thousands and thousands and thousands.
yeah,
Yeah.
since Friday when I moved all of my apps across, we've had 25,500 pings, 13,500 executions for 44 total tasks across 6 projects.
Right. That's quite a few.
And that's just my stuff. You know, if I
Right.
was to look at what we've had in what do you call it? In staging I think we've had like 30 or so people using it actively. I'll tell you in a minute. 64 total users monitoring 81 projects. We have had a total of 3 million executions and 5.6 million pings in the last 30 days.
That's an interesting number, actually. That means we're missing 400,000 pings. I mean, that means either it didn't finish, which is possible, right?
Well, they could have
Or
skipped.
we somehow missed the start. It missed sending the start one of those two, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, if we don't get the start, we have enough information in the finish to still complete it. So it's not critical that we get it necessarily, except if we miss the start and then your alert gets tripped and then we get the finish, like we can reconstruct it. But you may have received a missing alert because the start ping didn't reach us for whatever reason. It's rare that that's happened, and there's quite a lot of skips. I'm seeing hundreds.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Like where we get an execution, but the execution, all it was doing is it was checking and evaluating the when statement.
Yeah.
Right. So you have your when statement that has a closure and says, if this is true, then run it. So you just have a skip, and that's the initial execution that pings in. So you just have a skip ping. That's it. No finish ping.
I mean, it seems like it seems fairly common that people will, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 data points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 data points. So like people are skipping during the week more likely than the weekends, which seems interesting to me. When was the 7th?
That does. It seems like it'd be the other way around.
Right. I know. I can't see my calendar anymore. It's hiding somewhere.
You're gonna be the new JMac, giving talks about what you've discovered while looking at people's ping data.
Yeah.
Data. You're going to be like, we noticed that this many people skip on the weekdays as opposed to the weekends.
Yeah,
We've also noticed.
Like on November 7th, we had 142 skips. And on November 8th, we had 74 skips. That was a Saturday and Sunday. But on the 9th, which was a Monday, we had 497. Tuesday, 452. Wednesday, 390. Thursday, 494. So that's interesting.
It'll be interesting to see like things like holidays. Like what happens on holidays, you know what I mean?
So yeah, that's an interesting
like
thing. Hopefully I get in touch with Jonathan and he can tell me why I'm a damn fool, or if I'm trying to do is a good approach, or whatever. Over there, then Ping Me just yelled at me. Oh look, over the last 5 minutes, the average HTTP request duration has been more than 350 milliseconds. And I've been getting these like consistently
from
for the
Vapor?
last 2 days, from Vapor. So
yeah, I saw those too.
They come up, 2 or 3 times an hour. It's up, it's down again, or it's down, it's up again, kind of thing. There's an alert, it's finished. So I
here's one of the things that
really know why it's doing it unless,
Here's one other thing that I was thinking about as well, which is that, it does possibly happen on occasion that then Ping Me goes down, right? That could happen. It's possible.
It does, yeah.
Right. And
Which
so
is weird.
this is sort of the same thing that Fathom Analytics has, right? And so they were talking about how they did this, and we actually just are recently implementing the same thing with this phone system. So we have calls that we need to make internally, but these apps that we have internally are behind a firewall, and we didn't really want to poke a hole in our firewall to open it up to webhooks that are coming in from the outside. And so we said we'd much rather have like an outgress where we're going and talking out and seeing if there's anything available. And as well, we want whatever that we're sending those webhooks to be highly available. And so what we did is we said, okay, we're setting up an API gateway in AWS, and then that's going to have a Lambda that pushes to SQS, right? And then we'll have our Laravel app internally talk out to SQS and say, hey, do you have any new jobs for me? And when it does, it just grabs those jobs and just processes them through the queue, right? Just queues up the job and then runs it. Now that introduces a small amount of a delay, right? Because it depends on how often you're checking for SQS jobs. but you can be almost dang sure that they're going to be there, right? Like when those webhooks fire and they go, they're going to definitely, AWS is going to be up. That API gateway is going to be up, and it's going to
Yeah.
get pushed to SQS. So, I was thinking about that for our particular situation. Like if you did get a lot of load, right? Like having something like SQS in front of it would ensure that you never had a spike that made you drop pings. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I mean, the theory is that that's what we have now, is that we're
True.
using
With
API
Vapor, you're saying.
gateway. Yeah, we're using API gateway, and API gateway immediately puts the task on the queue. Like we don't process it in
Yeah.
that HTTP
You're
request. So we're already kind of doing that, but I wonder if we need to separate out that endpoint. But like it's
It's
just
super
weird.
simple to do, so
Like
it's
once
not
a
really. And
month.
the other thing too is like, here's the other thing why that's also interesting is because you could deploy one of those in each one of the regions, in each one
Yeah.
of AWS's regions, right? So that would save you from having to spin up a whole new Vapor app in each one of those locations, right? You could
Mhm.
literally just set up an API gateway and then process them centrally.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely need to look into it as we get into it.
Like I
Um,
said, we already set it up on our stuff, and it's really quite simple. The only thing that would be I'm not sure about would be authenticating people before they got to that point, right? So
mm,
so it would be some sort of weird situation where you'd end up having to, like, because right now what we could do right now is somebody hits us and then we authenticate whether or not they should be able to talk to us in the first place, and if they can't, then we just reject the
mhm.
webhook altogether, right? We just say nope, you're not allowed to talk to us.
Yeah.
And with this situation, I don't know if you'd really be able to do that up front. You'd have to sort of say accept it and then sort of figure it out afterwards,
Yeah,
right?
well, if we got
Uh,
some unauthenticated thing in the queue, we'll just go, I don't know what to do with this and discard it. Like we'll just bail out of
right.
that job,
Correct.
really. But
Totally. That's it's the same thing. It's just one step later, right? So
so this
you
API
you would
gateway
maybe
thing
not.
is, talk me through it. So you've got the API gateway set up, and
Yep.
what does it do? It just takes the JSON and throws it into SQS.
That's pretty much it. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep. And so this is the part we haven't built yet. So there is, I mean, you can use SQS as a queue driver, essentially,
Hmm.
just how you'd use Redis or your database or whatever. You can consume jobs from SQS, but I don't necessarily want to use it that way because we're already using Redis for all of our job stuff, and I'm not sure how it would work to have two queue drivers running at the same time. So instead, what I really want to do in our situation is I literally just want to have a little SQS um, connector, right? I just want to be able to talk
Hmm.
to SQS and say like, give me a job or give me something that you have out there, and then let me get it, and then I'll figure out how to handle that internally. Do I want to create a new record, and then do I want to dispatch a job for that
Yeah.
record, or what do I want to do with it? Yeah. So that's kind of we literally just set it up on Friday.
Hmm.
So um, that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah.
It's pushing those headers in this case from Livebox because they're only coming in through headers. It's pushing all those into a payload in SQS, and then we're going to be consuming them. So
Mm.
Overpower is building the second half of that, which is
Yeah.
grabbing them out of SQS and then consuming them. Yeah.
And it's not too far away from what we're doing. It's just
No,
decoupling
no, no.
that
It's like one
HTTP thing.
tiny little layer in front of it. That's all it is.
Yeah. So it would just be a matter of tweaking that a little bit, so that all of those things hit API gateway, and then we just have something that pulls. You can use SNS or whatever to
Yeah.
figure that kind of stuff out. That, oh, there's a job here. Get a notification from SNS that's like you need to do something, and then we'll go and pull it off the queue and whatever. So it
Yeah. And
it's
I
worth
know Jack
investigating.
Ellis. Yeah, I know Jack Ellis also said they used to do that, I think, and then they went to DynamoDB.
Yeah, and they're
So
using
I'd,
Dynamo
I'd be
for a
interested
lot of
to.
stuff now.
Yeah, so I'd be
And
interested
just
to look
like,
at that
because
too.
realistically, we could do all of that stuff. And I don't know how what we're doing now really differs in any great detail to doing that, because we're already using the API gateway. We're already shoving, the only thing that we're doing is that it's our application that's taking
That's
that
yes.
payload and putting it on
Yeah.
the queue. So the only difference would be that the API gateway would throw it straight on the queue, and then we would have to pull it off the queue. So
Exactly.
it's a very slight difference. I don't know if it's going to have significant impact, but certainly being able to deploy it to different places, and it's not like we're going to put one in every country. We would probably do
Right.
one one in Australia, one in Singapore, one on the east coast of the US, one on the west coast, one in Paris, and one in, Germany. Spread them out a little bit,
Right.
and
Exactly.
that way
Yeah.
you can just, it would be up to the user to say, I'm going to hit this endpoint because it's the nearest one to me.
You could just do region. Yeah, you could specify region. Right.
Yeah. So,
When
we could do that
in
kind
your
of stuff.
config. Yeah.
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 Like we could, and even if someone hits our site, we could figure out, what time zone are they in. And then we could say, like, if you're plus or minus 5 hours of
Oh, totally.
X, then you should hit this endpoint and whatever. So we could have, I don't think it would be too difficult. And then the only thing is you would have to have a slightly bigger database to be able to take connections from multiple.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment we've got, as I said at the start, we've got the T3 micro or whatever, which will give us around about 40 connections before it starts to shit the bed. So if we were to, have one in Sydney, one in West Coast, and one in Europe. So if we just had 3, if each of them had 25 connections, that's 75. So we would have to bump up the RDS instance to account for there being multiple, to account for all 75 of those connections being used at once. And go from there, which, can happen, midnight when everyone's running their daily tasks and things like that.
Yeah.
You don't want us to be the bottleneck to someone's application.
That's exactly right.
It's waiting for a response from then ping me, because we're pinging it and we're busy doing stuff. So
that's a great point. And it's like, that's exactly what you would see specifically is you would see a bunch of traffic on the hours, tons. Like that's on, on the hours, on the 10 minutes, like that's when you're going to see it. And it's going to be a massive flood.
Giving people these stupid fluent methods that are like hourly and it doesn't just pick a random minute. Oh, we could PR that. When you say hourly, rather than making it the 0 minute of the hour, it will just give you like a rand value. That's probably
that is interesting.
Although it would have to remember that random value indefinitely.
It would have to know in advance.
Like,
it would have
you
to
wouldn't
say,
want it. You wouldn't want it to be like random and it gives you 7, and then the next time it gives you like 24, because that's going to wreak havoc on us.
Right. Exactly.
Your schedule would be changing.
And also, it would not, like if you're looking, if you know that you're running on the half hour and you're expecting it to run on the half hour, that would be difficult. Like I have specific jobs I know that are running on the hour, and like sometimes I'll drop something into a folder and like, well, it's going to run at 2, and then at 2:03 I'll go look at it, and if it hasn't been done, I'm like, what happened?
Yeah. Historically, before Laravel, when it was doing stuff in the cron, when we had multiple things that had to run like hourly, we'd have to stagger them out. You'd say, okay, this thing's going to run at 7 minutes past, and this is going to run at 9, and this is going to be at 14 to allow the one at 9 to finish, and things like that. So there would always be once an hour, right? But they would be on a shifting schedule. And same with like, if you wanted to run twice an hour or every 15 minutes, well, you might run it at 3, 18, whatever 18 plus 15 is. You're the math teacher, you figure it out. And it would still, like, it'd be every 15 minutes, but it would be offset from the hour. So, and we would do that because we would have like 2 things that need to run every 15 minutes, but you don't want them to run at the same time, kind of thing. So
exactly.
So that is
and now we're just kind of spoiled. We just put it as on the hour. We've had the same problem. And this is actually part of the reason why we created Then Ping Me, is because if you do set everything to run on the hour, it's very possible that something could just fail and you would never know about it. Like, because it's like third in line, right? After the first 2 huge jobs, and then it never works, never runs or something.
That is very true. Very true.
That does
indeed.
happen.
In fact, I spoke about that very thing in
You did.
my presentation at the Laravel Worldwide Meetup.
Yep. And we're actually going to have a post on Laravel News coming up here on Monday with a link to that. So check that out as well. Hey, listen, my battery is at 11%. So I'm going to wrap up with a shout out to Fathom Analytics. So speaking of Fathom Analytics, you should definitely check them out at usefathom.com/north. So Fathom Analytics is a simple, lightweight, privacy-first alternative to Google Analytics. Stop scrolling through pages of reports and collecting tons of personal data about your visitors, both of which you probably don't need. The website stats show up on a single blazingly fast dashboard, so you can make business decisions quickly. Also, there is no cookie notice. Fathom doesn't collect any personal data, and they're GDPR, PECR, and CCPA compliant. So you don't need those cookie notices that come up at the bottom of every single page. We hate those things. In fact, they don't even use cookies. So if you go to the website and you go look at the cookie, you look at your cookie tab, whatever, There isn't one. They don't have cookies, right? Pretty cool.
Nice.
So unlimited everything in all of their pricing plans. They're ready for surges in traffic, as we talked about. So they're built to handle billions of page views, and they use enterprise level architecture. So your site's never going to be slowed down by the tracker. And their fair pricing model protects you from huge bills for occasional overages, which we all know happens. So they are used and loved in the Laravel community, as well as lots of other amazing communities. They have a weekly discussion called Above Board, which you should definitely check out on iTunes or Overcast, or look at their RSS feed. They've got some amazing blog posts, and these two dudes are just really great guys to be supporting. So definitely check them out at usefathom.com/north. That will give you a special little promo code. You'll get your free trial, but you'll also get, I believe, $20 towards your first bill on Fathom Analytics. So check that out. This was episode 85. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with us. If you'd like to find show notes for this episode, you can find them at northmeetssouth.audio/85. If you'd like to hit us up with any questions or comments you might have, at Jacob Bennett, at Michael Dorinda on Twitter. And we would really appreciate it if you would give us 5 stars in your podcatcher of choice. Always much appreciated. Mr. Dorinda, any final words for us?
I have nothing further. I'm excited to finally be getting this damn thing out. It's been a very long time coming, but we are there. We've finally got there. So looking forward to it.
It's gonna be awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye all.
Bye all. I knew it. I knew you were gonna say bye all. I said it at the same time as you. Bye everybody. See ya.